On the one hand, we seem to know from the inside our minds. We seem to know our minds better than anything else. What could we be more intimately associated with than our own minds? And then when we try to figure out how our minds exist in the world, how they could be, for instance, a function of what's going on in our brains, it seems utterly mysterious. When you look for minds in the world, there don't seem to be any. And yet we have the sense at the same time that each one of us has a mind, and we certainly know, each of us knows our own mind, it would seem, just perfectly. That is the way it seems. Certainly that's the way it seems. That's the way it's always seemed, I suppose. And that's why it's been so hard to come up with a good theory of consciousness, a good theory of the mind, because that just seemingly undeniable intuition is in some degree false. We're fooled about our own minds. Descartes famously said, "The one thing I can't be wrong about is the content of my own conscious thought. Whether it's true or false, that's another matter. But what my thoughts are, and that they're my thoughts, that I can't be wrong about." And oddly enough, I'm claiming that he was wrong about that. The one thing he said was most certain. In my book, I present a theory called the multiple drafts model of consciousness, which suggests that all of these demons are writing things down in some sort of brain language, these drafts of narratives. That was to counteract an over-reliance on pictures, which is a mistake. But the idea of writing is also a mistake. So let me give you a different version of the same theory, which is in an important regard equivalent, although it has some different images associated with it. We could call this the multiple cuts theory of consciousness, where we imagine a movie studio where they make films, and they've got all these pieces of film that they shoot in any order at all. It doesn't matter what order they shoot it in. And now it's being composed by various editing processes, and first this bit goes before that bit, and then that bit goes before this bit. And maybe you have different teams working on different versions of the same story at the same time. And maybe eventually one of them gets released as a film to the public, or maybe not. It may just get stored. Now, if you think, yes, but what's the right version? Is it the version where A happened before B, or the version where B happened before A? Which is the version? It doesn't make a difference what order the film was made in. Which is the correct canonical version? Well, you might think, well, if this is a studio that has a boss who's got his own private inner office, and the central boss meaner of the whole show, and at some point he has a private showing, and he sits there in his private theater and he watches a particular rough cut of the film. He says, that's it. Now, if somebody tampers with that film later and changes the order or cuts a scene out, then that's tampering with the official version. What I'm saying is there isn't any official version in consciousness. All the time, our brains are tampering with the contents. They're revising them, editing them. Some things are being forgotten, dropped out altogether. And the question is, what's the version when you were conscious of it the first time? That's a mistake. It's a tremendously attractive mistake, but it's simply a mistake. Now, the simplest phenomenon, I think, that I've come across that exhibits this is one called meta-contrast. In meta-contrast, here's what happens. Suppose I just were to flash a disk on a screen, nice and bright, flash, 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 flash. You'd see each flash very clearly. Then suppose I simply took a ring, a donut, and flashed the ring right after I had flashed the disk, so that the inner boundary of the ring coincided with where the outer boundary of the disk had been. Now, if I flash the ring immediately within a few milliseconds of the disk, then what you'll see is that you'll see them together. You'll see a ring surrounding a disk. If I delay the ring until, say, a second has gone by, then you'll see both in sequence. You'll see disk followed by ring, disk followed by ring. But if I get the interstimulus interval, the time between them just right, say about 120 milliseconds, all you will report seeing is just the second stimulus, just the ring. The disk disappears. It's a stunning effect. Now, how do we explain that? Well, here's one theory, and it's the sort of standard theory in the literature, that all you were ever conscious of, as you say, is the ring. And the reason is that somehow the first stimulus, the disc, doesn't get all the way up to consciousness. It's ambushed on the way up. It's waylaid. Somehow the ring overtakes it and prevents it from ever entering the theater of consciousness. And so you correctly remember that what you saw was a ring, and that's all you saw. Well, here's another theory. You were conscious of the disc, but the ring followed the disc in consciousness so swiftly that it simply erased your memory of that consciousness of the ring. Now we have two theories. One says that the disc never made it into the charmed circle. That's why you don't remember it. The second theory says, oh, the disc made it, but then the memory was wiped clean. There's no difference between those two theories, because there's no way of drawing the line that distinguishes the inner sanctum where what happens there matters. That's the mistake. That's a fundamental mistake of the Cartesian theater, and it's a tremendously attractive idea, and it's just wrong.
Yes. But yes?
A philosopher in discussion with me recently, Michael Lockwood from Oxford, said, perception is the leading edge of perceptual memory. To which I replied, edge? Edge? What makes you think there's an edge? That's the mistake. Eventually, material is deposited in perceptual memory, if you want to call it that. That memory itself may begin to decay very quickly. Moreover, it may get tampered with. But you can't draw that edge in such that you can say, now, it hasn't entered memory yet. Now it's entered memory, and any further tamperings any further adjustments count as a memory disorder. The line between a perceptual illusion and a memory disorder simply can't be drawn. Mm-hmm. Since it can't be drawn in a principled way, we have to give up this idea of this privileged place where the consciousness happens. Of course it happens in the brain. That's where consciousness happens.
Yes.
But there isn't any headquarters smaller than the brain, which is conscious headquarters. That's a mistake. And under normal circumstances, a more or less univocal, unequivocal, coherent, unified story emerges. It's the story I tell if you ask me, well, what did you see? It's the story I can tell myself. But if my demands for precision get high, or if my demands for unity get high, then I run into troubles. The story just only has so much unity to it, and beyond that it doesn't. And there just isn't any fact of the matter of how it really was in my consciousness, even though I can't tell. That's why meta-contrast makes such a good case, because when people see the meta-contrast stimuli, they see the disc and they see the ring. And when they just see the ring, and I say, well now, you tell me, or you tell yourself in your inner heart of hearts, did you see the disc? And forget it, or did you just see the ring? They haven't any way of deciding that. There's nothing that they can appeal to from the inside, from the first person point of view, that will distinguish those two. I say, if you can't distinguish it from the inside, and there's no principled way of distinguishing it from the outside, there's no fact of the matter.